what I wanted to ask you was, so with the exercises that, let's say, for instance, you see, let's say on social media, because we know some of those are bad, right? Obviously. So what would you say is the biggest problem right now when it comes to social media and the way you should, or that is portrayed on what you should be doing? Because I know you have, obviously, that practical application, and you have your own thoughts on that too as well. So I wanted to pick your brain on that one.
I mean, social media, I guess it would depend honestly on what the medium is, right? Like Instagram has a different set of problems than YouTube and different set of problems than not so much podcasts, but like, what is Instagram for? Like the attention span is so small. Like they're just looking for that click. They're just looking for that follow, that turn on post notifications or shares. Like, if you run a business and you're in the fitness industry, you know how to look at insights on a story. So you can start insights on a post. So you're like, you start to look at things in a way like, all right, well, this post did well. It was about this. We posted on this time, this day. It reached a percentage audience that wasn't already following me, And so I think what people do is they start to look just at like the numbers on the back end, and that just leads them to sensationalism, right? Like it just leads them to doing like, yeah, I don't want to name names, but like there's just stuff out there like, people doing bicep curls against no resistance, like just to get some likes and follows. Like, what are you doing, man? Like,
I know what you're talking about, but it's all good.
but it's like, and look, man, I'm not trying to, like, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to compete with those people. Like, I got my guys, and if people want to come in and work with me, like, they know where to find me. I'm not trying to enter into knife fights, but I think a big issue is that sensationalism. There's no barrier to entry. There's no context because it's not the medium for it. It's 60 seconds, right? Like it's a 60-second video. And like, even like I got to catch myself in putting stuff out. Like, you gotta have some skin in the game, right? Like if you don't exist on Instagram and you're not like an OG, like you're not really, this is where the game is played. So like, I throw my hat into the ring, but I have to be very careful on the words I choose, the captions I write, trying to go in and give context to situations so people have, if they so choose, a reference point or something to go back to and be like, okay, if this applies to me, I'm going to use it. Gotcha. And then like, it's the novelty, right? And I think that's what separates a good strength coach from just some dude on Instagram doing air bicep curls. It's like the idea, and I always make the comparison, and it's not like the most PC thing in the world, but I always say, like, imagine if you knew nothing about nutrition. And you were like, so you sat down on a bus and some like big dude, like, I don't know, like 500-600 pound dude sat next to you. And it's like, hey man, like I'm trying to lose some weight. Any advice? And you know nothing about nutrition. Like, most people could kind of sum up like, all right, man, like maybe like eat a salad and like walk up, like take the stairs and not the elevator.
Basically.
Like, okay, like that's like basic energy in, energy out stuff. And like, we don't know nothing about this guy and there's no underlying issue. Maybe it's just, let's start there. Right? That's a novel approach. Like, this is novel. This is going to be a new thing for this dude to try. Oh, yeah, sweet. Thanks, man. But then the next day, that same guy goes onto the bus and sits down next to him is this large Jamaican dude who runs a 19-19 200 meters. Like, if Usain Bolt sits next to you and goes, hey, I run a 19-19 200 meters. Any advice? What, salads, take the stairs? Like, that's not going to fucking work, man. Like, you have to be very specific. Right, like I think it's Sif and Verkhoshansky. When you read Super Training, there's a line in that book that says, "If your body was a bank, you would never do business there." And then he talks about the principle of diminishing returns. So I'm always trying to make not just the best athletes better, but find efficient ways to make your best better. Yeah. Right. And I think being very specific in that approach is going to be the best way to do it, because so much of it is just. It's just fluff. It's just sensationalism. And hey, feed your family, pay your bills, do what you got to do. As long as you're not hurting anyone, I don't really care. But at the same time, there has to be some way, and the open market sorts people out long enough. And I think, to a certain degree, over time, you'll start to see people fall off. Yeah. But I think it's just being able to be specific. There's no such thing as a dumb exercise or a bad exercise. An exercise without a specific intent is a bad exercise. So true. So if you can't bring it down from, the meso to the mesopsycho to the microbiology, like you don't do the exercise, right? So that's my biggest thing, like overarching. Like it's easy to like, oh, that banded whatever is dumb or that is, but I think all of those stem from this might work for a novel effect, like a novel response or adaptation, where you need to be driving specificity, at least when you try and work at like our level. Specificity is everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember a post that you put up, I think it was maybe a couple of days ago, about, we got to be very careful when we say it depends. And what does that actually mean? What does that entail? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because that was interesting.
So we're getting smarter. Like we definitely, as an industry, we're getting smarter, I think. Like, people are putting out some great shit and it's awesome to see. And hopefully we can like dilute out a lot of the noise with like people just, because the problem is the smart people, the really smart people are so smart they know there's so much to know. And then they get worried about putting stuff out because of that idea of like, look, context, right? So but now all of a sudden, like, the people who are out there trying to turn a buck, they're starting to use our language, right? And like, look, it always depends, but I find a lot of people these days are, when they're almost skirting questions and they're sounding altruistic by going, well, that depends, and that's like the question, that's the answer. It's like, if you ask me a question, my goal will be to lay out every variable of that question. It depends on, the height of the athlete. It depends on the previous injury. It depends on this. And if we're talking about this variable breaks down into these three sub variables. This is how we would address it. If we're talking about this other variable, this is sort of going to be the context around this variable. So to sit back and be like, well, it depends. And, I can only have so much time in my Instagram stories. And it's just, and the upper dorsimus connects to that. It's like, all right, bro, like you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like, 'cause that's the thing. Like there's something to be said about sophistication. Yeah. And it's something that I've learned to really like, when you see it, and the best part about sophisticated concepts or programming or things like that is when you see it, you don't even know you're looking at it. And that's, to me, it's so like, oh, that's my goal. Like when I write programs for guys, I just want to write like, the behind the scenes and like the drafts and thrown out and like this fucking Sudoku puzzle of programming and like the layers and filters that you look at programs through. And at the end of it, I want to present them something that they don't appreciate. I want to present them a program or a spreadsheet where it's like, I'm sitting there going like, oh, and they see exercises, they see reps, they see sets, they see rest periods, they see tempos, and they see a thing on notes and maybe a video cue, and that's the program. And I'm sitting there and I see like, 7-8 layers of depth and complexity, 7 different filters I put through this program to make sure that everything resonates. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they just see another program, and that's great because that's the whole point, right? If I got like, in column C, column C is there's an equation in column C that's gonna, and we're gonna go over here and that, make sure you put it in column. It's like, no, man, like that's complicated. Sophisticated is like, I always make the comparison of the Apple billboard, right? Like, ever see an Apple billboard? It's just it's just a phone on a white backdrop. Yeah. So when I said I work corporate, my first job as a chiropractor was at Apple's world headquarters. So I worked on site. When I say corporate wellness, that was my job. Damn. Yeah. So I worked so it was like kind of like out of the pan into the fire right away. But like, so this was my job. Like I worked with the staff at Apple world headquarters, from CEO, directors to software engineer, hardware engineer, and one of my patients, he was on the team that made those billboards. And like, so, you establish a good relationship with patients the same way you do with athletes. And it's like, over time, like, as I got more comfortable with them, I was like, man, like, what an easy job. And like, the dumbest thing I could have said, because he's like, are you fucking serious? I'm like, dude, you put like black phones on white backdrops, and we run through thousands of iterations of those. Thousands, like, so we have some where like the light hits the corner of the phone here, but we have another. See the difference? I'm like, you guys are out of your mind. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, but that's the point. Yeah. Like, that's, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And ever since that, I was like, oh, like that's such an art. Like the subtle art of sophistication is something that, like, because on the surface, like someone could, like, I could take a photo, put it on a white backdrop and put it up. And to the uninitiated look, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, iPhone billboard template, sure. But then like to like that artisan, to that craftsman, they look at it and go, oh, I see the moves. I see what you did there with like the shadow. And like I can see that. I know when I see good programming from other coaches, it's like you start to see like, you know, through the program, like that guy in Patch Adams with the 4 fingers, and like you're seeing the other 4 fingers come through. And it's like, oh, I see what you did there, right? Like, all right, you're trying to attenuate for lower back load, so you went for like a counterbalance squat pattern there because you're gonna hinge the next day. Like,
smart.
I like that. Yeah. So that for me, like when we go back to the root of the question of like what's the biggest issue, it's like there's just no specificity. There's no sophistication. It's just all like noise. It's all just novelty.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because if you're looking at like with my even with my video guys, like they look at other videos and I just see like a video. I'm like, oh, that's cool, but he's like pointing out different things. Like, no, this is just how they set it up with 2 mics, and it's just crazy stuff, man, with lighting and all this other stuff. So I get it, and it's the same thing when if I'm looking at programming, it's the same way. But I'm looking at it, and I'm also I read people fairly well. I think I do, you know, at the end of the day, and you can see who's true and who's real and who has the goods as far as really putting out that quality content, you know, and then the ones that are just kind of getting likes, you know. And that's why we connected too, because I knew what you were doing with certain posts, and you were just putting out these pictures that were grabbing people, but it was so much context that was developed into that post that it made people understand, at least from that perspective of what you're trying to relay over.